It's sad songs only for the 1-9 Titans at the Grand Ole Opry as the Texans take the victory at the last second. We're talking about all that and more on this edition of the Bullpen. Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is my trusty co-host, Tom Chevria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I will not be singing any sad songs because the Texans found a way with a backup quarterback and a subpar offensive performance to get a dub in the Music City.
They boot, scoot, and boogied their way through that win. So that's the kind of song I'm looking to hear. None of these sad songs, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was, I think, the epitome of what a Texans win has been this year, in terms of like 2 to 3 quarters of the Ravens, I guess, are the outlier or the exception, but 2 to 3 quarters of just like, sure. And then some moments or stretches of really good football offensively that kind of make the game work, which is really what the Texans need at this point. I think any intelligent Texans fan has come to terms with the fact that the offense is not going to be what wins us games this year. It's going to be the defense's ability to keep us in games and the offense's ability to occasionally step up and do something. So, and I mean that'll be epitomized in the Bills game, I think. Which, by the way, just housekeeping up front, we won't be putting out a preview for the Bills. We'll be going live after the Bills game. It's part of our transition away from the recap preview model. In the coming week, I'll be posting some introductions. We have brought on some contributors, kind of refreshing the way we do things here in the middle of the season at the Bullpen. So I'm excited for those changes. But this Titans game, I'd go with you on this one, Tom. I've kind of, as frustrating as it was to watch at points, I've kind of, this one, if there was ever a game this season that fits your favorite phrase, which is a win is a win, this is the one. Like, if this was CJ Stroud playing the way that, Davis Mills did, honestly, I could still take away a big positive because the way Davis Mills played today looked pretty good relative to what we've seen from much worse offerings from the offense in early parts of the season, where CJ just was not given the time of day. So the O-line kind of held up. So with that, we'll roll into our positives and negatives. I just want to hear what you've got to say first. So you go ahead and hit us with them.
So positive, right off rip, all the Houston teams today decided they wanted to win. So if you're a fan of the Rockets, it was not pretty also, but they got a dub. If you're a fan of the Cougars, the Houston Cougars, not pretty, but they also got a dub. And then the Houston Texans, not pretty, but found a way to get a dub. We did a preview of this game, and we kind of felt like the Texans should take Vegas's 7.5 points and absolutely run with them. And what we should have done was go, that is not the Texans' way. We like to have this, heart working, we want to, the blood pressure's got to be up. We want you to definitely be alive for this game.
What did you predict the score to be? I think you said 24-10.
Something awful. Yeah. Definitely not that. Definitely not that. And, that's what we do here in Houston with our football teams, high stress all the time. So wasn't pretty. There was moments where you felt like maybe the Texans could get right, and it just didn't happen. But positives for me, obviously the dub, paramount. I think Davis Mills really did enough to really solidify himself as probably, and I know it doesn't matter, but for me, I feel like he's one of the top backups in the league. To be able to put up the stats that he put up, and really make some plays down the end to really get them in a position to win the game. Hats off to Davis Mills. If this is the last time we see him for the rest of the season, the 2.5 games were a lot, and he really did a good job.
I've said it before. I felt like Davis Mills, if he was the backup when the Texans in 2011 lost Matt Schaub, I think that turns out a lot different. I mean, much love to TJ Yates, and I really appreciate what he did for this team. But I think that Davis Mills, in his current form, being the backup quarterback of the Texans at that time, creates an entirely different discussion where maybe the Texans go a little deeper in that playoff.
We'll never know, but
we'll never know.
I do like what Davis Mills was able to do at moments in the game. Obviously, he made mistakes. You know, there was moments in the game where I thought he did a really good job of avoiding sacks, you know, getting rid of the football, living to fight another day. And then there were moments where I thought he took sacks he didn't have to take and, you know, moved the Texans out of position to do more as far as field goals and stuff like that. But again, positive to win. Negative, I know Titus Howard got nicked up at the end of that game. Really think that Titus Howard being healthy, if this offensive line is ever going to reach its full potential, it has to have Titus Howard in it. So I'm hoping that whatever the issue was is not severe and that, you know, there's a chance that he could play Thursday. I know it's a quick turnaround. Other negatives, it's nitpicking a little bit, but the special teams again, you know, didn't really function, you know, full strength.
Like they had one or two good plays, but overall,
yeah,
I agree with you on that one.
Tremont Smith had another, I would say, subpar day on special teams. Matthew Wright, I think is his first name, Matt, right?
Yeah.
You know, made the game-winning kick, missed the kick earlier in the game. Luckily, it didn't necessarily come back to bite him because, you know, there was a penalty that took that off the board. But I really feel like, you know, this is a team that's going to kick some field goals, so need that guy to be sharp. You know, the defense failed again to stop a team late. There was, you know, an opportunity for them to salt away the game, team up 7, and Tennessee found a way to put points on the board late in the fourth quarter. Another huge QB scramble. It's definitely something that I think Matt Burke and D'Amico Ryans need to be held accountable for. More Matt Burke than D'Amico because he has given up play calling duties. Obviously, you know, he's always got to say, but I think if we're going to sit there and constantly point the finger at D'Amico, then, you know, might as well take Matt Burke out of the middle because if not, you know, why make him the defensive coordinator? I think I think D'Amico's done a really good job of being a head coach and not really meddling too much with his coordinators and deferred to them. And some people don't like that. Some people feel like D'Amico is a negative. You know, obviously he had a questionable challenge that didn't look good on replay.
And then didn't challenge the Jaden Higgins catch. They eventually, you know, threw the touchdown to Nico Collins, luckily. But, man, that the way that the rest of those plays shaped out afterwards, I was worried that might be a challenge they regret not making.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that D'Amico Ryans had a bad day at the office. I tend to feel that it's hard to have a bad day at the office and you get a win. Could he have been better? Sure. Everybody could have been better. Ariante Ursery could have been better today. You know, he got beat up, but he's a rookie and you got to allow some grace there. I feel as a whole, the team is still kind of young. When you look at D'Amico and Burke and Nick Haley, you know, these guys, they're all 3 years or less experience. Like for me, a lot of people feel like this team is a Super Bowl caliber team when they're perfect, right? So you're comparing against some of the best head coaches in all the league that have 20 plus years of experience. I think it's a little unfair, but I understand there are people that are like, what have you done for me lately? So that could be perceived as a negative. And I know I've been on the soapbox for a little bit, and that is all I have for y'all today for that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, positives and negatives, big positive for me was that the Texans managed to move the ball effectively at points. I think that the biggest positive in that is the way that Davis Mills was able to find Nico Collins. I think that we've had a consistent discussion / narrative around Nico Collins' effectiveness in this offense with Nick Haley. Specifically, I think early on it was an issue of, is he even being schemed open or to be targeted? Since I think it's been an issue of, getting open, it's still semi scheme issue. But in recent weeks, Nick Caley's been calling some really good games, which once again, another positive. But Davis Mills these past 2 weeks, if there's one thing that I'd like to see CJ look at when he reviews Davis Mills' game film, it's whatever he's doing that's getting the ball to Nico Collins. So to me, that's the biggest takeaway in terms of what CJ could afford to get from this. As someone who has Nico Collins in fantasy football and generally speaking really wants the Texans offense to do well, I think that's a huge plus. Looking at the negatives, the defense just, I know it's nitpicky, but the defense kind of felt like a little off balance, especially when it mattered. You could still look at this as an offensive problem because the offense had quite a few 3-and-outs, quite a few possessions that kind of put the defense in a bad spot. I agree with you that special teams also had its bad moments, but I'd be remiss in not obviously pointing to some of the punts that Tommy Townsend made as being really bright spots in what was not the best day for the special teams unit. And then I also agree with you that coaching in general across the board, outside of surprisingly enough, with what we're talking about, like on the field versus the coaching, I felt like aside from Nick Caley, a lot of the coaching had some questionable stuff going on. Because I'll stand by, as much as like in the past, it felt like the offense wasn't functioning because of Nick Caley's play calling. I think today we can say that it was the execution of a really well called game that at points kind of held itself back. Execution and discipline, which is the last negative. I mean, the Texans had quite a few penalties. Not as many as the Titans. The Titans, I think Aaron Wilson hit him with a pretty sick burn. I love it when Aaron Wilson, because most of his tweets are like factual stuff, like just like Nico Collins is, has 9 receptions. That is a high or whatever. Like usually it's pretty factual, but I like when he throws a little flavor on it. And he said, I don't even remember exactly what the word was. He said the Titans have the case of the false startitis or something like that. And I was like, wow, Aaron, you really put some flair on that one.
I thought it was offside-itis.
Offsitis. That's what it was.
Offsitis, yeah.
I was like, good grief. Cause Aaron, he's usually pretty like,
that's why he's the GOAT.
Yeah. So he usually, he's good for one of those every game or so. So I like that, but yeah, overall big time performance from the Texans, lots of positives, lots of negatives, but the big thing I want to talk about moving away from that discussion is, I have it up here as Trent Brown, Titus Howard. It's really similar discussions, but that side of the offensive line, obviously until at a point in the game where Titus Howard suffered an injury, was pretty solid. And if you look at the live grading of that game, Titus Howard grades out really good as a pass blocker in that game, and Trent Brown is not far behind. That side of the offensive line was probably the only reason Davis Mills had the time of day to throw. What do you make of that side of the offensive line? I know we've had this discussion a few times, and really, I guess broad strokes could be across the entire offensive line. When everyone is healthy, what is the best offensive line configuration for this Texans team?
So to be fair, Trent Brown did have his struggles pass pro also. I think he's an amazing run blocker. I think he's just an average pass blocker, which, I mean, average isn't going to kill you. Obviously, we saw Davis Mills have some time to make some great throws in this game. So I don't know that he necessarily was like a game changer. I think he was good. I think Titus Howard was really good. I think Titus Howard is without question the best offensive lineman on this team, and wherever he's going to end up, whether it be left guard, right guard, or right tackle, that's advantage Texans. Now everywhere else, you hope to get it right, and if that means you got to move him around to get somebody in a position that works for them, I think the real interesting question is when Ed Ingram comes back, because in this game we saw Titus Howard slide in for Ed Ingram, and that's really going to be interesting if they could have a line that features Trent Brown, Ed Ingram, and Titus Howard on it. How good that unit could be, because we've seen Titus push into the left guard, and I think there's a lot of people that want to see that. And being that he played right guard entirely this game would make me think that he could play left guard if Ed Ingram was in there. So it'll be interesting. For me, I think the best configuration would be Ursery, Howard, Andrews, Ingram, and then Trent Brown. I think.
For me, like, and I definitely, my first thought when Trent Brown played was like, okay, this is serviceable. This is a level of right tackle play that makes you ask the question, is moving a tackle, right? That Titus Howard at right tackle is all pro level tackle, one of the best tackles in the league right now. So the question is the benefit of him at the guard spot above and beyond what you're getting there in a way that makes it worthwhile? Like, are you overall improving the quality of your offensive line, or are you marginally handicapping yourself on the right side just to get what is a marginal improvement inside? And so to me, the biggest development that's altered my view of it, because like just, looking at it from before Trent Brown came in, the left guard spot was a Juice Scruggs and Laken Tomlinson rotation that was a mess. And it was something that I would have jumped at the opportunity to put Titus Howard in for, because Titus Howard, while not the best left guard in the league, would have been a massive improvement over that group. And Trent Brown being average, is the drop off at right tackle versus what you gain at left guard, to me, makes sense there. Now, the biggest development that's happened in the past week or two is that the Texans, in Titus Howard being injured, put Trent Brown in, and then decided to make another change across the offensive line with Ed Ingram also out in City So at right guard, which was awful. But on the left side, they put Jarrett Patterson in. And Jarrett Patterson, to me, going into this offseason, I was like, there's one part of this offensive line that is consistent. It is, if there is one part of the interior offensive line that should be the same, it is Jarrett Patterson at center, because he was serviceable and played at a level where, you don't aim to improve that position if you have other deeper problems. So I didn't suspect the Texans would bring in Jake Andrews and make the move away from Jarrett Patterson. I thought he was pretty cemented in this offensive line. And with his flexibility from center to guard, I would have suspected that he would have also gotten some run at guard if they weren't going to play him at center, when it became apparent that Jake Andrews was the new golden boy that was going to, get the center job. And then the Texans didn't do that. They I guess valued him a lot as their backup center. But the development of him getting playtime and showing what I've been one of the bigger champions of Jarrett Patterson being this diamond in the rough. I don't get why the Texans. I get it, because the coaching staff is different from the general manager. But if I'm Nick Caserio, I watch what Jarrett Patterson has done, and I see him as the best case for Nick Caserio is not incapable of drafting offensive linemen. Like, he is the poster child, in my opinion, if I'm Nick Caserio, of, hey, look, I drafted this guy in the 6th round, and you can put him anywhere on the interior and he's serviceable. This is like literally the definition of being able to make the most with the least, because that pick should not be a contributor on this team more times than not if you've got a bad GM. So I think that Jarrett Patterson and the level of play he's provided at left guard the past 2 weeks makes it really hard for me to believe that Titus Howard should not be at right tackle. I think that your best offensive line configuration, if everyone's healthy, is Titus Howard, Ed Ingram, Jake Andrews, Jarrett Patterson, and Ariante Ursery. I think, and I say that with the understanding, like I mentioned it last week, Trent Brown not being in the game after what he's shown is tough. He makes you have that conversation with yourself where you're like, does Titus Howard provide us better value at guard? But you've got Ed Ingram, who has shown so far this season to be one of the best right guards in the league. And with Titus Howard at right tackle, that means that, as much as most people would find it hard to believe, the right side of the Texans offensive line is playing at the highest level, which means it's really just the other 3 spots that are letting them down. If Jarrett Patterson is serviceable, Jake Andrews has been serviceable. There's been some bad moments, but I think overall he has been about what I think Jarrett Patterson could have been for the Texans at center. But if you're getting what Jarrett Patterson could have been for the Texans at center at left guard, now it's still your weakness. The center to left tackle is basically the problem with the Texans offensive line right now. Ursery, rookie, gonna have some slips, like that's just expected. And then left guard and center on a good day, serviceable, that gets it done. CJ Stroud will have a lot of opportunities with clean pockets with serviceable, as opposed to god awful trash, which is what we've been feeding him at left guard in a rotation for a lot of the season. The improvement, and now granted, right, like as much as we talk down on using PFF grades as your only evidence with the offensive line, there's not like stats or anything to back up. It is eye test or PFF grade, or one confirms the other. Like that is what you have. And so watching the Texans play, as far as I could tell, Jarrett Patterson looked a lot better than what we were getting out of Laken Tomlinson, Juice Scruggs. And I don't think he's at the same level as Titus Howard, but I think that the drop off at right tackle with Titus Howard being moved from there to Trent Brown is not worth what you're getting with the improvement from Titus Howard to Jarrett Patterson. So yeah, I would say that I'm running with that group. And I'm glad that we don't have the same opinion, because that would be really boring. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the case that I've presented?
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Jarrett Patterson, because like a lot of people,
you were looking up some information about him as I was talking.
Not him. I was trying to get my names right because I'm terrible with names. Okay. So for me, Jarrett Patterson feels like a Chris Strausser guy. And the reason that we're not getting more Jarrett Patterson is because he's not a Cole Popovich guy. And that's, for me, that's the only way I can seem to equate why we saw Jarrett Patterson in spades last year, and now he struggles to get on the field, and everybody's like, why aren't we playing Jarrett Patterson? And that's the only thing that makes sense to me, because you're right. There's nothing, whether PFF or the eye test or anything, that says Laken Tomlinson or Juice Scruggs is the guy. But to me, it feels like Cole Popovich has a whole lot more faith in those guys than he does in Jarrett Patterson. Because if you're literally just throwing stuff up at a wall to see what sticks, why wouldn't you play the guy that was probably more reliable last year than some of the other guys? And oh, by the way, you were in the building for it. You had a front row seat, unless that was never a guy for him. He never saw him as a part of his offensive line, because Jarrett Patterson struggles to get on the field, but when he does, he doesn't have an issue, and it makes people question it, like you just did right now. So I don't know if Jarrett Patterson is a really good dude that just crossed his offensive line coach, or if he's just always put in a position to succeed and he's protected. Like, okay, we're not going to burn him out there against a premium front or something like that, or he'll be playing, against a backup dude or something. I don't know. To me, something doesn't add up with Jarrett Patterson, because it seems like when you think you should get him because he has put good film on tape, you don't get him. And how does that make sense?
I like where your head's at. I like the investigative trail of tracing back what could be probable cause. And I think that with that in mind, these past 2 weeks are something that publicly and within the Texans organization put Cole Popovich in a position where it's like, hey, we know that you maybe don't like Jarrett Patterson, but now we have objective quality evidence that would point to the fact that if you don't play him, you are dumb. And we can't abide with that. We can't let you make the decision to not let him play after what we've seen. And I think, Nick Caley probably talked to him after what he saw last week against the Jaguars and said, hey, I don't care what you do when people come back, but left guard is locked down. That's Jarrett Patterson until I say otherwise. And I could, if I was Nick Caley and I listened to Cole Popovich all offseason and through the early parts of the season talk about how, it can't get any better than Laken Tomlinson and Juice Scruggs in a rotation at guard. And I went, don't we have Patterson? Have we not thought to put him out there? He's pretty solid starting for this team last year. And he said, no, don't worry. That's not the option. And then you got forced into a position to use it, and it showed that. Yeah, I'd be like, hey, Cole, I know how you've talked about Patterson all offseason, but that ain't it. And as your offensive coordinator, I have to step in and, for the sake of my job and yours, override your decision there and say that you must play him at left guard. And who knows? I mean, we could see a bad game from him, but one bad game from him doesn't change my opinion on it. Like, I think that that's, like I said, serviceable is what we're looking for, and that's what you get with him. Jake Andrews is serviceable. He's had at least one or two bad games, but I mean, I think in this game he rated, in the live grading from PFF, he rated it like a 20 in pass blocking. Like, he was not Davis Mills' best asset along that line. And a lot of the pressure came from the middle, but he was also playing against Jeffrey Simmons, so I'll cut him some slack there. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, tough to look at that and not ask the question. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. We've kind of talked about Davis Mills, but as far as his performance goes today, what did we get from this? Because I think, to me, the biggest observation is, obviously we've seen the discussion unfold around maybe they should stick with Davis Mills. And I think that shifted away from, I think there's a small faction that's like, he should be QB1 because CJ Stroud is not cutting it. But I think the real discussion that has developed from this, and the question that I have for you, is with the short week, the Texans will go into Buffalo with the question of, is CJ Stroud going to clear concussion protocol? What is your opinion of what the Texans should do at quarterback based on how that goes? Like, looking at it, like, if CJ is clear right away, if he simulates practice on Monday, which from what I've read, you can do simulated practice in order to simulate your symptoms and gain clearance, even if the team doesn't practice that day. So it is an option. If on Tuesday they came back and said CJ Stroud clear, like just look at all the different possibilities. Do you see CJ Stroud playing against the Bills?
If he clears, absolutely. If of all the people that I think you don't need a full week of prep or anything like that, I feel like the quarterback is one of them. I feel like those are guys that, they just need to be healthy. I don't think he needs to be out there throwing timing routes to wide receivers in week 11 or week 12 of the season to prove that he can play. You know what I mean? Where another guy like look for example at Titus Howard. Like, Titus Howard practiced, but do you feel like he needed the practice to be able to play? He just needed to clear the symptoms. And then I think other than that, he was healthy otherwise. So I feel like CJ would be the same way. It's just going to be interesting to see, like, Monday's going to say a lot, right? Like, if he's able to walk through, if he doesn't have the symptoms, then he plays. If he doesn't, maybe Tuesday is probably like the telltale sign. It's a home game on a Thursday, so I don't know.
I saw what the Bills did to the Buccaneers. Came out and laid it down. But I also know that when the Bills face a really quality defense, that is what creates a good game. I think that's why the Texans played them and won last year. And I think it's the key. So then the question becomes, is the guy you're putting out there at quarterback going to be able to do enough to take advantage of what this defense is going to do to the Bills offense? And so I think that if it comes down to the wire, that you maybe stick with the hot hand. I say that understanding that while the offense looked inept at points, Davis Mills statistically and generally speaking was solid. I think that he showed a lot more in this Titans game of like not reading when to step up in the pocket correctly. So there was points where he should have stepped up in the pocket but got sacked because he sat back. And there was other points where he was like, oh, this is the chance that I have to step up in the pocket. And the pocket was collapsing. And so he basically stepped into a sack. But I think overall, what you've gotten from Davis Mills gives you comfort in going back to him if you don't feel like CJ is 100%. But I think that if CJ is cleared, especially early in the week, it is difficult for me to say, yeah, but we'll use him as an emergency backup and we'll stick with Davis. It's like, no, I think that this offense has progressed in CJ's absence, and I think that in the ways it's progressed are things that will massively benefit CJ when he's out there. I don't think you should force him out there if he's not ready, but and you do have that that confidence in Davis Mills as a quality backup to be to rise to the occasion. But and then there's also like a factor that to me that doesn't really matter, but could matter to some people, is that, you know, it's a primetime game on Thursday in Houston. Those people that have bought those tickets weeks in advance did not pay to see a 5-5 Texans team led by Davis Mills. They paid to see a Texans team that's being led by CJ Stroud. So it would be a real shame for him to not make it in time for that game, all because you think you have a better shot with Davis Mills, even though Stroud's been cleared. So I agree with you, if he's cleared, especially early in the week, that he should be a go. I think that, do you look at that? And if you see him at less than 100% in game, do you look to pull him? That's a whole nother discussion. I think if you're going to go with CJ Stroud, you have to go with him. You can't do this like, well, we'll put him out there and see how he does and pull him, because then you're only feeding into this division and, you know, like just, oh, well, we put him in and pulled him, and benching a starting quarterback is just, even in that situation, to me, is not the move, unless you're like ready to move on from him at the end of the season, and, or, you know, you want him gone. And I don't think that's where the Texans are at.
I'm curious, is this where the fan base is at? Like, I don't see a scenario.
It's feeding off the discussions around QB1. It's a very minute discussion. So I think it's one of those things where there is a very small faction of the fan base that really likes the idea of Davis Mills at quarterback. And I think that, and I don't think that the organization should make decisions with this in mind. I think they should do what they should, but the optics of putting CJ out there and then deciding mid-game for any reason other than he is hurt to pull him in favor of Davis Mills is something that would start a wildfire in that discussion that could push more people in that direction. Be like, well, if we think Davis Mills gives us a better chance, why is he not QB1? And so I like, that's something that goes through my mind. I know you hate those discussions. You hate those hypothetical, what the fans think, how the organization should function based off of what the fans say. But it's just something that went through my mind.
I think I hate them because I think they're so far-fetched. Like, I don't know why people have this affinity with Davis. Like, we have tape on Davis, and I get it. Like, he came out of college with not a lot of reps, and now he has some reps. So maybe he's, you know, be progressed, and we could be holding on to Baker Mayfield or something like that. And I'm like, look, man, CJ Stroud is the future. And if he's not, then we have huge problems, because like you've invested a ton in that dude, and you're going to invest a ton in that dude. And I don't think you're going to invest a ton in Davis Mills. Like, I get it, he's a hot hand, but there's nothing in the game against Tennessee that I saw that goes, oh yeah, this guy is leading this team to the best possible outcome from here going forward based on what I saw in 2.5 games. So there's no conversation. I mean, maybe his parents might feel that way.
I would hope his parents feel that way. It would be a real shame. Yeah, my mom said that I should really just... Is that why he's signing all these contracts to stay in Houston as a backup? It's like, well, my mom said that she doesn't think I could cut it as a starter. So I'm just going to... I have a good gig here as a backup in Houston, so I'm going to stick with it. That would be crazy. But I mean, I feel for you on that. I think it is interesting. I mean, to be fair, to talk to that, I mean, Davis Mills, number 1 quarterback out of high school, out of his class, and that was the same class as Trevor Lawrence. And like you said, not a lot of reps at the college level. I felt like he was drafted into a situation in Houston where the person running the show on offense didn't really have a scheme that was set up to work for him. And whereas I feel like Bobby Slowick, Nick Caley, both of those guys run schemes that should really accentuate what Davis Mills is. So that's why I'm not surprised that we've seen him perform well in those schemes, and why I think the biggest thing the Texans are doing for Davis Mills right now, not because they want to, but because of necessity, is giving him the opportunity to show other teams, hey, I'm a quarterback and I can play. And if other teams bite on that, then so be it. But I'm just happy the Texans have him as the backup now. I think it's massively beneficial. Mac Jones level of backup, which is not to say much, but I mean, it is to say something to what Davis Mills is for this team. But let's look one last discussion before we bring this thing to a close. But the Texans with this win moved to 500. So for the first time in this whole season, the Texans are not a team with a losing record. Massive development, huge. Matt Burke, like I said last week, talked about how it is huge for the psyche to get to that point, because now you're no longer losers. You are just right in the middle, ready, poised to pounce and move up a little bit. So massive development for the team. With that, they are sitting at 5-5 with two other teams in the Chiefs and the Ravens. The Ravens are on a hot streak. They've put together a pretty good run since the Texans played them, where they've put together, I think, a 4-1 run, or I think they've rattled off 4 straight wins. And so they're in a good spot. I think they've got the momentum. The Chiefs, after going 11-0 in 1-score games in 2024, ends up being 0-5. I think the Texans are 2-5 right now in 1-score games. The Chiefs are 0-5. They lost to the Broncos by 1 score right there at the end. So 3 teams that I think a lot of people viewed as being in contention for the number 1 seed are now all sitting just outside of the playoffs. And you'd never believe it based off of how we've seen the Texans play. But I guess the wins they've gotten, the record they've put together, by some miracle, they are the top of that group. The Texans are number 8 in the NFL. They are 1 spot outside of the playoff picture. They're just sitting right there. How do you feel moving forward from this point, knowing those teams, both really good teams? I feel a lot better about both of those teams than I do the Texans. It's baffling to me that the Texans are considered technically the best of those 3 teams based off of how the NFL ranks. How do you feel moving forward with where the Texans schedule is at and what we've seen so far in this stretch, being just outside of the playoff picture?
So I feel really good. And I think that the Texans have played themselves into the position based on some of the teams that they've played. You look at that game that Kansas City lost to Denver, and Denver was a team the Texans played incredibly tough. So I really feel like where you look at them going forward, yeah, Kansas City's got all the hardware and they've got all the players, but they've run into some teams and haven't played their best ball, or maybe this is their best ball and they're on their way down a little bit. Baltimore dealt with a ton of injuries. The Texans caught them at a perfect time. They have the tiebreaker against them. It totally makes sense why they are ranked ahead of them. They have a division that they're fighting for currently. That division is wide open, where some of the other, all the other divisions in the AFC are pretty lopsided. Denver is now 9-2. They're head and shoulders above, Kansas City in their division. And Indy is also 9-2, 8-2.
Yeah, Indy, New England, and Denver are all division winners with leaders with 9-2 records.
So, that's kind of how that all shakes out. I do feel like the Texans can play with both of those teams. I think even at full health, the Texans can give Baltimore problems. I'm really looking forward to the Texans potentially, catching Kansas City after maybe a really exhaustive win. They've got to play the Colts, so I'm expecting them backs against the wall. They've got to put their best foot forward against the Colts. Maybe the Texans catch them as kind of a trap game later on. There's a lot of things that could happen, but being 5-5 is where you got to be right now. For them, a loss against Tennessee would have been, super detrimental. You look at what they have going forward. They've got a schedule of 7 games that I think, there's a potential for them to go 4-3 at a minimum, but maybe 5-2, and then you're talking about a team that got to 10 wins, even though they struggled mightily. So division games are in there also. If you feel like Indy isn't the team that the record says they are, if they split with them, who knows?
Yeah, and I think the Texans are kind of in control of their own destiny at this point. It is very tough to look at that schedule and not be worried. And I guess to clarify, like it's more the Chiefs to me that I feel like are very clearly, I think, in a better spot than the Texans. They've got a serviceable defense at the very least, and they've got an offense that is capable, just has kind of sputtered in recent weeks, recent years. But even then, they're getting their footing back. So in the next 2 weeks, playing the Bills and the Chiefs, kind of puts the Texans in. Or is it the Chiefs or is it the Colts? I don't remember.
I think it's Bills, Colts, then Chiefs.
It's Bills, Colts, Chiefs, and that Chiefs matchup could very well have a lot of implications based off of where the Texans sit. So, but I'd still say if I view Buffalo as the must-win game in that group, and like I think I've explained this logic before. I've looked at the rest of the Texans schedule and I see some pretty clear easy wins, like games that they should win. There's 3 of those remaining for this team in the Raiders, Cardinals, and Chargers. Those are 3 games the Texans 100% should win. There's very little doubt in my mind, especially with CJ Stroud returning potentially, or definitely for those games, I would hope. Those are games the Texans will win. So as it stands, the Texans are an 8-win team. I don't want to say guaranteed it's any given Sunday, but like those are wins that I'm kind of counting on right now. Like someone who is budgeting for the family and just kind of counting. There's some money you're kind of counting on being there. That's money in the bank for me. Then you look at these other matchups they have. We're entering into a stretch where it's 4 games out of these 7 remaining that I think are tough. And I look at those games and I break them down by must win or tough matchup. I would understand if the Texans lost that one. It's not going to be the end of the season if they lose that game. So I obviously with Indy, I would be looking at a split. I think that that would be huge. Getting swept by Indy would be very detrimental given how important divisional games are. The difference between being a 4-2 team in the division versus a 3-3 team is huge. And then you look at the Chiefs and the Bills. I think between those 2 games, if I'm counting a split in that series, if we're looking at them as 2 separate series, I think that the Bills are the team that are the most beatable between the Bills and the Chiefs, which feels weird to say with them having a better record. But I just know for a fact that when they face a good defense and that defense is on, which is why there's some concerns coming from this Titans game on the Texans end. But if the Texans defense comes in and does what it can, then this game is a very winnable game for the Texans. So I would count it as a must win because if they don't win that one, they have to either have to sweep the Colts or beat the Chiefs. And that's not something I want to consider. I'd rather just get that win against the Bills now and call it a day. But yeah, so looking ahead, I agree with you. I think the Texans are in a great position. They're kind of in the driver's seat. There's just some things they need to make happen that so far this season, I don't know if they've shown enough to make it a certain thing, but I think that they've shown enough that I don't have like zero confidence in it. I'd say my confidence is rising in their ability to handle that. So with that, Tom, do you have anything else to say before we bring this thing to a close?
I think we will know a lot about this Texan team in 4 short days. The Buffalo game is really going to be a game that I know you just said that you feel they should win or they need to win. I think they can lose that game and beat a Chiefs team that I don't think is especially great and watch them struggle mightily against a Denver team that, the Texans probably should have beat, if I'm being honest. An injury to your quarterback, really kind of threw them off. So why can't the Texans beat Kansas City? I feel like that's a thing that they could do. So we'll see how it all plays out. Obviously, we'll be here for the whole ride. The Texans are at 5-5 and have a chance to make the playoffs.
I mean, I think that this next 3-game stretch is very vital that the Texans go 2-1. I think that's really what they have to do in this next 3-game stretch. There's obviously, other considerations where they can get away with going maybe 1-2, but I mean, they have to win a game in this stretch. That's for sure. And I think that I like the Bills the most, and it's the Chiefs offense that worries me because as much as I really like the Texans defense, I think that at the end of the game, if the Texans offense can't produce against the Chiefs defense, that grueling defensive about the atrophy of a defense, as we call it, will hit a little quicker against the Chiefs than it would against other teams based off of what I've observed from them. So that's why I am less high on the Texans to win that matchup. But man, it would feel like a rite of passage. It would feel like what's needed. I've been talking college football playoff about what Navy needs to do to make it. Cause obviously veteran of the Navy, my dad is actually alum of the Naval Academy. So I've been to a few games. It means a lot to me. It's probably the college football team that I follow the most closely. And I think honestly, as it stands, they have a really good chance of making the college football playoff because they're at the top of the AAC. But it feels like the rite of passage would be to beat Notre Dame, because it feels like Notre Dame is like the one school they have to play every year that's like head and shoulders above them in skill. And like it's like they got throttled by Notre Dame, I'm pretty sure. This past season it was like 49-10 or something. It was a rough watch. But I feel like in a way beating the Chiefs is like a rite of passage for the Texans. Like beating them would be like, okay, we're ready to do this kind of thing, even in their current state. So I guess that's all I got to say about that. We have been the Bullpen. I'm James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL, and Tom. I'm at James Roy NFL everywhere. And then Tom is TC Tom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the #1 veteran run Texans podcast in the entire universe, as far as we know. So yeah, do with that information what you will, but just know you're supporting your troops when you listen to this podcast. So thank you for listening. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.